Alrighty, so let's get some more interesting things going on here. We're gonna work in code a lot, but also outside of code. This might be like the longest of the videos. First thing that I want to do though is I want to get our ground in. So what I'm gonna do is I'm going to go ahead and drop this in, and we'll notice that if we click on the ground also has to like scroll along with the background, right? Now, these assets are ones that have been passed down in the in our department, and I really am not a fan of this ground. It's 808 pixels. So where our background is 800, with the ground being 808, just kind of irks me a little bit. It means that like our repeating background won't work exactly how we want it to, right? Instead of the width or the constant scroll width, it would have to be 8.08. Or we can I don't want to do that either because the edges of it kind of blend into each other really, really well right now. So, all that being said, let's go ahead and let's write a new script. I want to check one thing in my notes really, really fast. Da, 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 da. Okay, okay, okay. I'm going to pause it for just a second. Alrighty, with our grounds in, let's do what we did with the backgrounds one more time. I'm going to duplicate our grounds. I'm going to go ahead and make sure one is at 0, 0, but then I'm going to lower it, of course. I have to actually make it the ground. And then the other one, I'm going to make it 8.08. And where did I put the... We're just going to do this. We're going to take this Y and we're going to put it on this one. And you'll notice they line up perfectly, right? Now, our scroll width is still 8, right? We want to go and have it go all the way to the end. So let's go ahead and add the repeating background script to them. Now, because this is something that's really important, it's going and taking a look at like how can we reuse scripts, how can we reuse assets, right? So if I were to go and play this now, I'm pretty sure what we're going to see is our ground loops as well. It works pretty good. Now there might be a couple places where our ground like overlaps a bit. Let's take a look. Where does one ground start and another one end? There we go. It seems to be holding up just fine, right? That's where the seam is. It seems to be working rather well because they are right next to each other, but we're moving them a set amount to the right. So, okay, our ground is moving and all that good stuff. We're going to need to add some collision to this ground eventually, right? And some collision to our plane and some collision to obstacles and all these different things. And you might be asking yourself, well, the plane, maybe we could put a circle around it, right? We can do a circle collider. Ground, a big rectangle collider would be kind of bad. So let's go ahead and look at a polygon collider. And you'll notice right out the gate that, wow, this is working pretty good. It's tracing around. It's doing everything that it should. This collider is a bit more expensive. If we were to go put it on the plane, click on our plane, and do polygon collider, it would also work. But it's not something that I think you really need, right? For everything. For the plane, I think a circle collider is just fine, right? Um, Going ahead and saying, yep, maybe even give your player a little bit of grace by having the circle collider be a little bit smaller than the plane. You really only want to be using polygon colliders when you absolutely have to. And it's the same thing in 3D games. There's something called a mesh collider. You don't really need a mesh collider for something that's very rectangular or orb-like or a primitive shape. But as for this ground, it's going to come in handy, right? And so too when we get into obstacles. So we have our background, we have our ground. Let's go ahead and build those obstacles real quick. I'm going to go ahead and drag in this rock. I'm going to drag in this rock. And it's a very tight squeeze. I don't think we're going to make that one. But let's go ahead and set it up so that we can. Now, we talked in the previous game about childing objects. I'm going to tell you right now, we're going to want these stalagmites and stalactites. Don't ask me which one. which one's which, to kind of move together, right? Um, Theoretically, you don't need to, but we are going to for this specific version of the game. So I'm going to create an empty object and just call it obstacle. Grab our rock grasses, drag them under obstacle, so that way then when I move obstacle, I move both of these guys, right? Now, I never like it when my parent object is off center of my child objects. So I'm going to zero their position out and put them on a higher layer and then move them vertically. So that way then when I have my obstacle, move it so that way then the obstacle is like in the center. So now my obstacle is a little bit closer to the center. I think that's fine. Now I can have these guys move. If I move the obstacle, I move both of them. Let's set it up just a little bit more. The rock grass things, I think, will benefit from having a polygon collider. They are more a unique shape. Now, theoretically, we could have our obstacles use the repeating background as well. They would move just fine. But I don't want them to go back over here. I don't want them to just pop back over and then keep moving. I want them to go over here and destroy. We're going to keep spawning more over on the right here. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to our scripts folder and create a new script called obstacle. And you might be thinking, but I don't want to have to code all that. They almost work the same. Well, we won't need to because of the power of inheritance, right? Sorry, we only need to change a couple things. And popped over onto my other screen. So here, the power of inheritance says, okay, repeating background inherits from mono behavior. That allows us to put this script on game objects. Obstacle, however, can inherit from repeating background. And now, let's go ahead and do that real quick. Let's see what happens. There's no code in obstacle. But, oh, it's thinking. I put obstacle on here, and let's make it move a little bit slower than the background. I'm going to say 3. I'm going to take my plane. I'm just going to leave my plane there. It went. It just followed because it's the same thing as repeating background at the moment. So it's going to do everything repeating background does. Now, last video I said ignore this protected, ignore this virtual, right? What this means is public functions can be called from other scripts. Private functions cannot. They can only work in here. And I could make this private and it would still work. But if I want obstacle to be able to do anything with this function unique, I need to do 2 things. I need to make it protected and I need to make it virtual. Okay? Protected basically says things that inherit from me can mess around with this. Things that inherit from me can use this. Virtual means they can also override it. So what we're going to do is we're going to say protected override, and it should autocomplete for you. Because it's going to look to see, well, what can I override? This off the bat is going to say my handle off screen, based on handle off screen, all that stuff, means do everything that the original said. We don't want that. It's saying go and move my position. What we want is to destroy this game object, right? We want this just gone, right? So now, if we were to save this and go play, we should see the background or the obstacles go over to the left and destroy. Very, very nice. You might be asking yourself, okay, this is cool, this is great, but we don't have more popping up. What did we use in the last game to spawn our bricks? To keep things moving, to keep things going? Game manager. I think game manager is where we should do it again. So we're going to go and hit create. We're going to go create a model behavior script, and we're going to call it game manager. I'm going to pause the video for a second, so if you see a jump, I apologize. I just want to get a couple more notes up. Alrighty, so let's go ahead and make our game manager. We're going to make an empty game object, call it game manager, and go ahead and add our script that we made onto the object. And let's open it up and get working in it. There we go. First things first, if we're going to be spawning obstacles, we're going to need a serialized field, a reference to them, right? So I'm going to say private game object obstacle prefab. And I did it again every single time. Now, I could put this in update and crash my game just by saying spawn obstacles every frame. I could put in start and I only get one. What I need is a timer. And I'm going to show you guys a way. I think we get how update works at this point. I still need start. Hold on. We're going to do something a little bit different. This is how I get around using update because I personally don't really like it, right? I'm going to say public, and trust me on this one, enumerator, spawn obstacle routine. It's going to give us an error right away. This is kind of, the way we're going to write it is an update that only runs when you tell it to, right? So I'm going to say while true. This means work just like update. And we're going to say yield return null. It means return nothing, just like how update does, all right? These are some of those words that you just gotta start just remembering, right? We're using a while loop here, and we're using a yield statement. The yield just says, okay, I've gone to the done. I've gone through one cycle of this routine. What did I yield? What am I returning? Nothing, right? So, if I want my obstacle to spawn at a certain rate, I'm going to go ahead and say serialized field again. I'm going to need some kind of timer, right? Not game object. This is when the tab doesn't work for you. Float spawn timer. And I'm going to need one more spawn timer max so I can reset the timer when I'm ready to, right? And I'm going to say if spawn timer is greater than 0, I want to subtract time from it, which we already have something that keeps track of how much time has happened between every frame. Otherwise, we're going to set spawn timer back to spawn timer max. There are other ways you can do this, and people who have coded for a bit might be asking, well, why don't you just do a wait for seconds? This is just how I like to do it more. It gives me more flexibility of being able to do other things in here should I want to later, and not having to go refactor things and add silly timer things. But I'm going to set the timer back to its max, and then instantiate an obstacle prefab. Let's go ahead and do a spawn point as well. Let's do a serialized field. Private transform spawn points. Now let's do that. Let's go ahead and say we're going to spawn them at our spawn point dot position, and we're going to use that good old quaternion dot identity. This should get us some. No, it won't. This only will happen if we start the coroutine, which we're going to do in start right now. Okay. Spawn obstacle routine. This start coroutine says this little repeating action. Let's go ahead and start it. You might think, if I had a main menu, I wouldn't want it to start right away, right? I want to push a button. This is what you would do when you push that button, right? You would go ahead and you'd say, okay, push the button, start the coroutine, or maybe you have a timer at the beginning, like a countdown, like a 3, 2, 1, and then you start the coroutine. This is why I like coroutines more than update. They kind of are little cycles that you can start and stop whenever you want. And we're going to see how we could stop it very easily when we eventually update this while condition. Because what that while loop does, it says while whatever's in this parentheses happens. So right now we have true in there. It just says while true equals true. And it's just like saying while an apple equals an apple. It's just always going to be true, right? So now, let's go ahead and add some things in, right? I'm going to make my obstacle spawn point. Put it over to the right off screen, because I don't want to have to see it. I'm going to give the game manager my spawn point. We don't have a prefabs folder. Oh no! Let's make a prefabs folder. Folder, prefabs. And let's make our first prefab, our obstacle. I'm going to go ahead and delete it out of the scene, because I don't really need it there. I'm going to say obstacle, and my spawn point timer, I'm just going to have it be 2 for right now, the max. I want it to start spawning, excuse me. It's always 3. We want the spawn timer to start right away, spawn something when we tell the game to start. So this should go ahead and say, there's our first one, and it counts down, there's our second one, and there's our third one. It's great. It's working perfect. And they're destroying at the end. The game's running well. But I can't really do anything. I'm not crazy about that. I'm not a huge fan of that. And I'm being real. It's starting right at the start. Also not a fan of. So let's do one more thing. Let's make a vector 2. No, not a vector 2. Yeah, vector 2. And we're going to say randomness vector. You can do this with 2 floats. You can do it. I'm going to use a vector 2 here to show that vector 2s aren't always like an X and a Y position. They could be a minimum, maximum. They can be bounds for you, right? So what I'm going to do is when I spawn it, I'm going to make a new position. I'm going to say vector 2 spawn position equals new vector 2. And we know we want the spawn points X, and we know we want the spawn points Y, at least as part of it. Oop, I forgot the position. Position.x, and we want the spawn points position.y. But we can say float offset equals random.range. This is how we get some random numbers, right? Randomness vector.x, randomness vector.y. So what random.range does, let's hover over range and see what it says. It says that the returns a random float within the minimum, the first number, and the maximum, the second number. I'm going to add that to my y value. So we're going to add our offset there. Now, let's go take a look at what this says. It says, here's my randomness vector. It's 0, 0. I'm going to make it -5 and 5. Right? So we're going to get a pretty big range of differences here. And if I go run it, I'm going to notice some kind of foolery. Okay, that looks good. That looks like it went a little bit lower. Wait, are they going lower? I don't think it's changing, man. Let's check something real quick. Random.range, randomness vector, X, Y. Oh, we didn't actually use this vector. I knew something was off. See, this is all part of coding. There's always going to be something. We're just going to change this to spawn position right here. Originally, we made this new shiny vector, but we didn't actually use it, right? So instead of just doing our spawn point, we're going to go ahead and use our spawn position. Now let's go and run it again and see what happens. Now we'll probably see some funkiness, right? Because -5 and 5, that's kind of a big difference. That's pretty low. Oh, that's way too high. Oh, that's super low. Oh, that's actually okay. That one's fine, I guess. No, it wasn't. No, it wasn't. No, it wasn't. I'm gonna go ahead and make it -1 and 1. And this is part of what our game designers would have to come in and tell us. What are the good numbers, right? What can we, what feels right, what feels good, and that's showing that like game design is more is just as much a science as it is an art, right? So playing with these different numbers, very very important. Now we have our things spawning, we have our background moving. I want to do one more thing, and that's actually get things colliding, because you might have noticed our character doesn't collide with anything, and that's because it doesn't have a rigid body. Now, I'm going to make the gravity scale 0, just so that way then we can see it hit and get moving, but this should allow for collisions to happen. There we go. Go ahead and move this up here. Oh no, there he goes. This is reminding me of one small change I want to do for us. Alright, so the last thing I would do to change this project is setting our rigid body of our player, its collision detection to continuous. And that should get you obstacles spawning. Player there, kind of. Background moving, underground, like our ground, like the actual ground, moving, and everything working really, really well together. Next thing we're going to be doing is getting our player input going, winning and losing, and then getting sound effects and animations working. I think that should wrap up the rest of Tappy playing. So thanks for watching, and let's check out what's going to be next.